Oh yes, you are welcome back. In today's video and today's topic, we dive into the main reason why Nigeria can never develop and the reason why everything these terrorists they have taken over everywhere and over everything in this country. The main cause, the main problem facing Nigeria and why Nigeria cannot develop and why and who sold Nigeria, those that sold Nigeria and what, the people that sold Nigeria to France, to terrorists, to bandits. And is it possible for Nigeria to be redeemed? Is it possible for Nigeria to be retrieved back from them? All those questions is what we are going to answer today. And because so many things have been happening, so by this our brother Dele Farotimi is going to tell us a lot concerning all those things that is going on in the country. Because if you can see and if you can look very well, you'll see the way the Fulani terrorists and the bandits they have already taken over everywhere and over everything in the country. So and the reason why they are doing all those things because they believe that Nigeria has already been sold to them. So nobody can take it away from them, no matter how you do, no matter how you cry, because they believe that Nigeria is a property and Nigeria is a father property. So, and today, our brother is going to explain a lot concerning what is going on and how Nigeria can be redeemed back, and if Nigeria cannot be redeemed. So, I would like you to sit by to watch it to the end. Don't skip any part of it for you to understand everything going on in this video because today it is very, very high. Today video is very, very high. Don't skip any part. So as you're about to watch, try to like, subscribe, and share the video to go around. Let others see things happening in the country.
Who sold Nigeria to Tinubu? Who sold Nigeria to the Fulanis? Who sold Nigeria to the Islamist terrorists? Who sold Nigeria to the Chagoris and to France? Is it possible that we may redeem this sale? Because how else do you explain that a functional state is being run in the manner in which Nigeria is being run? How do you explain that we are where we are? So I sat back and I thought about it. What is it about us that has rendered us uniquely evil? What is it about Nigeria? Because there is really very little that is unique about us as a colonial enterprise, because everywhere else, Britain had colonies. India was a colony of Britain. Today is a world power. China was substantially subjugated by the West. Today, they are a world power. Malaysia, almost every nation outside of the Western Hemisphere at one point or the other was a colony. Ghana was a colony. The same history that Nigeria shared with other African countries. So why is it that we do not appear to have risen above a sold country, a purchased territory? I sat down and I thought about it. Is it unique that a country was purchased in the manner of Nigeria? Yes, Nigeria was purchased, by the way. Yeah, it was purchased. In 1867, it was purchased by the British Crown from the Royal Niger Company, which had a charter over the territory largely in the southern part of Nigeria. So the British Crown revoked the charter and purchased it back. And as at that time, I believe it was £867,000 that was paid to the Royal Niger Company to purchase Nigeria by the British Crown. So Nigeria was a purchased territory. Now, the legality of its sale is another argument for historians and for political theorists. But I have need to mention it so that we begin to understand where our problem began. We were treated as a territory that contained certain things, including human beings that were treated as chattels, including gold, this, that. That was how we were sold. A territory was sold. Commercial proposition. But this is not unique to us. America bought Alaska from the Russians in 1867. No, sorry. Around the late 1800, they purchased it from them. That was in 1867. $7.2 million was paid. Seward was the Secretary of State who purchased it he purchased Alaska from Russia for $7.2 million. It was known as the Seward Folly. That was a joke. That he went and purchased an ice garden until they found gold in Alaska, I think in 1897 or thereabouts. So it is not unique that a territory is sold. What is unique is that persons were sold without their consent. But that is, as I have said, a story for political historians to deal with. But there is a consequence for the way Nigeria was founded. The British purchased a territory, a business proposition. And in purchasing a business proposition, like any good business owner, they have to figure out how to run their business. You are already, of course, familiar with the British doctrine of indirect rule. But indirect rule, as with every other thing in life, has its consequences. Indirect rule meant that the British decided to work with existing structures, and where the structures did not exist, create structures that mimic the structure by which they prefer to administer the vast territory that they had now given to themselves. Imagine this: the southern and northern protectorate, colony of Lagos, merged together, right? You probably had, at the most, I doubt that there were ever up to 100 British administrators available to run the entire enterprise. Even the soldiers had to be sourced locally. They only had white officers. Have you ever pictured the Hausa? Have you ever pictured the Fulani header? Young boy sometime, probably sometime barely in his teenage years. And you find that this kid is the one that is controlling a vast herd. It is pretty much the same thing when it came to the way the British ran the empire. It was the same concept. Nominal direction by the British district officer working with the existing or constructed local governance capacity. So the British came in what is today known as northern Nigeria. I am not going to be doing too much to repeat what I have spoken about or that I have made clear and made available. Go and download The Imperative of the Nigerian Revolution. I've touched on this extensively and the book is free. Download it from my website, delefarotv.com. It's available free. Download it. But I'll touch on it briefly. In building its governance structure, the extreme dependency was placed on indirect rule because it was the only way this could work, given the limited human resource that could be deployed to Nigeria and almost everywhere across the world, because the British had a huge colonial enterprise. So what happened was that in northern Nigeria, there were already two governance structures covering most parts of it. That's the Kanem-Borno Empire and the Sokoto Caliphate. What happened essentially was that these two had the colonial superstructure layered over them. I don't know what else I can do. I'm having repeated complaints about my audio. You would have to manage it like that today because I don't know what else I may be able to do to help matters. So let's keep going. So you had a situation where they layered their governance structure over the existing Islamist empires that you have in northern Nigeria. Now, this Islamist empire, and I mean Islamist empire because they were essentially based on Islamic rule. The Kanem-Borno Empire and the Sokoto Caliphate. Now, there were multiple ethnicities who had not been conquered either deliberately or because they couldn't. These people were brought largely on, they were brought under Fulani and Boronu influence. And in some cases, their chiefdoms were recognized, but of course, they were given lesser status. So you have things like the Nupes, they were there, but at the end of the day, what you have was a situation where, because the Fulani controlled a larger expanse of land, they had by far better organized, centralized, highly systemized governance structure, and so did the Kanem-Borno Empire. This became the model for Nigerian governance. In southern Nigeria, you find that in Yoruba land, our Obas didn't have those kind of absolute powers, and they were also not necessarily, they didn't have religious powers of the sort that you find with emirs and the sheikh of Borno or the sultan of Sokoto. They didn't have those kind of theocratic powers. But at the end of the day, what you found was that the Britain administered Nigeria to the exclusion of citizens. They dealt with agents. That's why they could never talk about British authority in Nigeria. So they had to deal with nominal agents of Britain whom they treated as speaking for me and you, or at least our ancestors. I'll give you a case in point, a major fraud. The Alafin and the Oyos were taken essentially as the voice of the Yoruba. So any agreement with the Alafin was taken as being valid over the whole of Yoruba land, regardless of whether they were independent states who had either rebelled against the authority of the Alafin or who were never really directly under his authority. You found that they preferred to deal with totems, obas, emirs, and in the southeast, they created Igwes and what have you. They created all kinds of warrant chiefs. In the south, of course, they created all kinds of trading houses and created persons that they could speak with on behalf of persons they never consulted. That is how the modern Nigerian state was coupled together. There was never discussions with citizens. They dealt with totems. That was the beginning of the sale of Nigeria. Because when you do not have the voice of those who are meant to be citizens aggregated to form the basis of the sovereignty of a state, when you can continue to deal with representatives, unappointed, unanointed, unelected representatives instead of the people, and what these unanointed representatives of the people say is almost always a reflection or echo of what the colonial interest desires. It's the same thing today. Who elected Tinubu? What happened to the Nigerian non-aligned status that we are all of a sudden the cowboy of West Africa? We are the ones who are busy retaking Benin. Who gave him that kind of power? Where did he derive the authority from? Who sold Nigeria to Tinubu? These are the kind of questions that one necessarily has to begin to ask. So the consequence of indirect rule is the creation of warrant chiefs who have continued to rule Nigeria because they are completely bereft of legitimacy and their power do not flow from the will of the people. But yet, the colonial powers have no problem with dealing with these persons on our behalf because these persons represent their interests. So now, if Nigeria was sold to Britain, who did Britain sell Nigeria to? Britain simply handed Nigeria to the Fulani, the favorite child. That is history that do not bear any argument against the structuring of Nigeria, from bringing Robertson to come and midwife Nigeria's independence, removing Macpherson. These were all deliberate ploys designed to hand Nigeria over to the Fulanis. This was already predicated by the rich census. There were multiple things that were done to ensure that power was handed to the Fulani, and that's fine. I have already spoken about hegemonies. All around the world, countries have developed on the back of hegemonies. It has always taken the overbearing influence of an hegemony to develop a country. I spoke last week about the development of America by the WASP hegemony, the development of Britain essentially by the English. I've spoken before to the development of India by the Brahmins. It is normal that everywhere all around the world an hegemony would come at the end of the day to develop a place. That is why the character of most countries, you will find that the character is shaped by the hegemony that ended up influencing the birth of his modern state. This is normal everywhere in the world. So that the Fulani hegemony was favored by the British for his own selfish interest, that's completely fine. It's a matter of history. It does not bear argument any longer. But the question is this: what have the Fulani done with this power? When I say the Fulani, let me be clear that I speak to his aristocracy, or what should have been his aristocratic class. The aristocratic class for which power was handed, led by people like Ahmadu Bello, they had enough understanding of nation building. And that was why, in spite of the urgings of Gumi's father, who was the Grand Cadi of northern Nigeria, in spite of his urgings and machinations, Ahmadu Bello knew better than to insist on the application of Sharia outside of personal civil matters. And that was what led to the introduction of the penal code in northern Nigeria, when the rest of southern Nigeria was using the criminal code. The penal code was crafted to take care of Muslim sensibilities and to ensure that the Christians in northern Nigeria, who are by no means a minority, let's be clear about that the Christians in northern Nigeria would not feel threatened by the rise of the Islamists. Ahmadu Bello understood the need for this. Whether you even say it's about Akia or realpolitik, in spite of his own instinct, the fact is that based on this clear understanding of the need to build a modern state, Ahmadu Bello ensured that in place of Islamic penal law, what you had was the penal code, which was lifted essentially largely after studying the Pakistani system, which required the same. So what you had was a compromise designed to preserve the illusion of one north, because it was behind that illusion that the northern prerogative was exercised by the Fulani aristocracy, ably headed at the time of independence by Ahmadu Bello. Now, when you begin to understand that this power that was given those, understood by those who got the original license, they also understood that it was critical that that power be carried with respect and with an understanding from the sensibilities of those in whose name the power had been appropriated. I will explain myself. In 1962, you had what was known as the TV riots. The TV riot was not unique to the TVs, but TVs were probably the largest of the ethnic groups that had not been dominated by the Fulanis, because they fought, the Idomas as well. So you had a situation where the Middle Belt was in a state of famine. And this was because persons were overreaching themselves and the illusion of one north was being broken. Consequences of this led to the Western regional crisis, because there was a need to make up for what was being lost in the Middle Belt. The illusion of one north was being shattered, and there was a need to couple together the coalition that could retain the Fulani veto. That led to the rupture of Nigeria. I'm saying all of this so that you begin to understand where we are in relation to Nigeria. Now, who sold Nigeria? Nigeria has been sold to the Fulani, I told you. It is the misadministration of the Fulani veto that has led us to where we are today. I'll break it down. Every time power is unyoked to law, it is always bound to end up badly. The power that was granted, remember I told you, it wasn't granted to citizens. It was granted to totems and hegemony. The administration of that power, how it was administered, was always going to be critical to the way it would impact on the lives of the citizens. When the first coup happened, it happened because the victims of the hegemony rebelled against the use of its powers. When the second coup happened, it was because the beneficiaries of the veto needed to retake the veto. And in retaking the veto, there was a recognition for balance. And this is why, in spite of the fact that Muritala Muhammad was the protective head of that coup in July 1966, he ceded power to the highest ranking northern officer, who was not a Fulani, but a northern minority, Yakubu Gowon. I'm not going to say God rest his soul. I learned his time ended as well, as all of our time will end someday. Yakubu Gowon was the inheritor of that veto, and I will explain. If it was about military hierarchy, there were multiple persons ahead of him in the military. So even if you say that after Agui Irosi's death, the most senior person should take over, it was by no means Yakubu Gowon. The ascension of Yakubu Gowon, ignoring people like Ademulegun and Admiral Way, and I believe about 2 or 3 other persons who are clearly ahead of him. I believe even Ojukwu was a senior. It was a clear declaration of the northern veto. Northern, because to legitimize it, you needed, you couldn't be called a Fulani veto because they required the illusion of one north to exercise that veto. So that veto was exercised in 1966 in July, and that was what brought Yakubu Gowon to power. This excursion in history is very, very important, because diagnostics is just as important as treatment. If you fail to understand where you're coming from, it becomes difficult to navigate your way back to sanity. Yakubu Gowon took power and thus began the unilateral redesign of Nigeria and his sale. And when I speak to his redesign and sale, I'll remind you, as at the dawn of the first coup, Nigeria had 4 regions. By the time the military was handing Nigeria back in 1979, I believe by then, I think, was it not 19 states? And by the time the civilians ran it for 4 years, from 1979 to 1983. And beginning from 1984, up until when the military left again in 1999, it moved from those 19 to your current 36. A country was unilaterally designed under the imperative of an hegemony without consultation with those it calls citizens. Who sold Nigeria? Who? It is almost impossible to talk about the sale of a country, but you can speak to the sale, hypothetically, or let me say, in a metaphoric fashion. So, the military restructured Nigeria, restructured it without consultation. Who sold it to them? You and me. By our silence. People did it for different reasons. The religious class sold Nigeria. The silence of supposed good men in the face of evil normalizes evil. If you are called by God's name, either as a pastor or as an imam, even a babalawo, or the head of an lady, and you see this evil and you have kept quiet, you sold Nigeria. Those of you who were busy talking about before David, there will be Saul, you sold Nigeria. Those of you who have been asking people to fast and pray for a better Nigeria, when you can see that it is human agents that are destroying Nigeria and not some demonic forces. The demonic forces are flesh and blood. You sold Nigeria. If you've been asking people to pray, to fast, instead of rebuking evil, you sold Nigeria. If you have, as the Munafikun, stood behind your pulpit in the mosque and excused evil like Gumi, you sold Nigeria. If you have excused evil like Pantami, you sold Nigeria. So when we speak about persons who sold Nigeria, if you once railed about good governance and your voice has become stilled in this season, you sold Nigeria. If you are a student in the university, because let me tell you, in 1960s, the early 1960s, up until 1962, Nigerian students, particularly of what became the University of Ibadan, University College back in those days, they were the ones who ensured that the British Nigerian Defence Pact could not be executed, could not find realization. They understood the threat it constituted to Nigeria's sovereignty. They understood the importance of a country's sovereignty. You, Nigerian students of today, what are you doing? In your universities, you are busy. You are very busy. My sound is not muted. You are beg, leave that story. Other people are hearing me. Check your own sound. You are busy in your universities. Nigeria bet Nigeria, bet this, bet that. You are popping one pill after the other. You're busy whoring and doing one thing after. The only thing you never think about is Nigeria. And then you are talking. You sold Nigeria. You think you are too young to care about the future of this country. When we were in the universities, we did it. You can abuse us all you care that we failed you, but what have you done? You are selling Nigeria with your detachment from it all. You're selling Nigeria. You're selling Nigeria. See, Obasanjo came in 1999, beneficiary of these multiple sacrifices of different persons who led to that moment where you won what we'll call a democracy. It came in 1999. Nigeria was sold to him by those who didn't want to lose control of their enterprise because Abacha could not control what he had grabbed. Obasanjo came to power. And I dare say he sold Nigeria too, and I will explain. In the lead up to his re-election in 2003, when Yerima and other northern governors became concerned about their own re-election, and they were looking for ways of ensuring that they did not lose power in the 2003 election. They could see the bear that Obasanjo was and how he was going to seize control across the country. So what did they do? They weaponized Islam. It was in the lead up to the 2003 election that you began to see the declaration of Sharia in northern Nigeria, beginning from Zamfara, with Jangebe in Zamfara. What was Obasanjo's response? The same Obasanjo who could unleash maximum force against the OPC in southern Nigeria, who could unleash against Bakassi Boy and every other person who was daring to challenge the authority of the Nigerian state. The same Obasanjo was busy deterring and talking about how he will fizzle out his political Sharia. That thing that he dismissed as political Sharia because of his own political interest, that thing is what has formed the basis for the madness that you see all around northern Nigeria. I'm not suggesting that Obasanjo wanted anything like that, but the refusal to deal with the madness that was emerging in 2002 into 2003, dismissing it as political Sharia, that was what laid the foundation for the rise of Islamist madness in northern Nigeria. If Obasanjo had dealt as decisively with the rise of what he called political Sharia in 2003, would we have seen the rise of Boko Haram under Montu Shehu? Would we have seen the normalization of this madness all across the length of northern Nigeria? But Obasanjo treated it as political Sharia. He ignored it. He didn't mollycoddle it. He ignored it. It was politically expedient that he ignored it. And he ignored it. And that was what led to the normalization of the madness that overtook northern Nigeria. That was the beginning of it. And then Yar'Adua came. Unfortunately or fortunately, he couldn't stay long. And then there was GEJ. GEJ sold Nigeria by his cowardice. When GEJ was busy telling you that he had Boko Haram members in his cabinet, what did he expect me and you to do when he, the president, is the one informing us instead of dealing with it? What were we supposed to do? What information did he offer? What direction did he offer? What leadership did he provide? What leadership did he provide? None. Asasi was killed. Yakowa was killed. What did he provide? Nothing. On the eve of his departure from power, in spite of the classified reports that he had access to, what did he say? His ambition was not worth the blood of any Nigerian. In response to a man who had imported terrorists into Nigeria ahead of the election, instead of responding by informing the people, educating them, and responding to the threat, was busy talking about at the end of the day, his ambition is not. But a country is worth the blood of his men, and I doubt that Nigerians would have surrendered to the evil they surrendered to in 2015 if he had managed to provide the leadership to resist it. But he sold Nigeria with his cowardice and with his lack of vision. He left. Sold Nigeria to Buhari, the same man under whose imprimatur terrorists had been imported into Nigeria before the election. Cycle complete. You had Islamist terrorists already in place, no thanks to the tolerance of what was referred to as political Islam in 2002-2003. And into that mix, and brought Fulani terrorists. Baraje told us, that's not delivering to me. Commander Laomi told us how nothing was done when it was brought to his attention in 2016. We've had multiple stories coming from the terrorists themselves telling us to go and ask Buhari during his lifetime what kind of deal he had with them. Thanks to El Rufai, the short devil of Kaduna, we know today that bandits, quote and unquote, terrorists were paid, and that the Kaduna state government, for instance, is still paying. We know, for instance, that some people were paid, and while they were paid and they were rampaging, we were told how they were paid subventions. We were told when their subventions were stopped and they began to pillage. The ones who are in our jungles, who are organizing this kidnap for ransom, they are completely different in most cases from the Islamist terrorists. So Nigeria has been sold by those who are meant to protect it. Its territorial integrity is being sold, compromised, its interest completely compromised. And then you look at the extent of compromise of national security. And then you ask the question, who sold Nigeria? How did a person like Pantami end up being in charge of our national data? How? Somebody who is a self-confessed terrorist became our minister for technology in charge of our national database. How? How? Who sold Nigeria? And me and you, we kept quiet. And then when Buhari was done, he sold Nigeria as well. He sold it to Tinubu. This is very simple. Look all around you. Every law was compromised to make Tinubu the president of Nigeria. His pedigree didn't matter. The president. His educational background did not matter. He had to be the president. The sovereignty of this country was sold to make Tinubu the president of Nigeria. Laws be damned. Morality be damned. And it's not just the judiciary who sold Nigeria to Tinubu. Where are the elders of this country? Where are they? Where are they? The political class, or should I say crass, where are they? Where are they? Who is speaking? A government is awarding, a president is awarding a contract with a no-bid contract at an unheard of price, at an outrageous sum, outrageous in the extreme, 2 point something. I can't even wrap my brains around the figures any longer. But nobody's talking. Nobody's talking. Nigeria has become Tinubu's property to do with as it pleases. What has Obasanjo said about it? Please, what have you heard from Abdulsalam Abubakar? Which one of your pastors have talked about the coastal road? How much have they collected out of it? Why are they all quiet? Nigeria is the way it is. Something that outrageous has happened that everybody who once spoke have kept quiet. Quiet. It's not even about us imagining things. It is about us being told. We're told routinely. In a country that has over 20 million children out of school. In a country where people cannot go to their farm. In a country that cannot even secure its own border, where somebody was Achi. I think that, yeah, Venerable Achi was kidnapped with his wife and daughter. Ransom was paid, but they killed this man in front of his wife and daughter, who must have been serially raped by now by these monsters. That country had hundreds of children in terrorist custody. The same terrorists who were phoned to release children, the same terrorists Bayo Ononuga told us they have their numbers, they can talk to them, who couldn't be spoken to. How absurd do you get? Hundreds of children in their custody, but this country has enough firepower to go and stop a coup. No problem. On whose authority? We have decades of non-alignment in our foreign policy, but overnight, Tinubu, a president lacking in legitimacy or popular mandate, he had been thwarted in his attempt at attacking Niger, thanks to David Udeyin and whoever leaked that memo. This man, within hours of a coup, could mobilize our Air Force and our special forces into Benin Republic. Before the dust of that one is even clear, under very opaque circumstances, our Air Force jet is grounded in Bobo Dioulasso or wherever in Burkina Faso, with our airmen detained, and they are still busy lying. Who sold Nigeria to Tinubu? That none of you can even talk. Nobody is asking questions, and before the dust is even settled, they are talking about our fathers fought against the sale of Nigerian sovereignty to Britain, who was our colonial master, the original owner of Nigeria, who actually paid the price, purchased it. Our fathers fought and ensured that these people could not, under any stretch of the imagination, bring that defense pact to function. But this generation is sitting down. A president forced on the country is selling our sovereignty brazenly. Our tax records, supposedly anonymized, would be shared with another country. Does this make any sense? Who sold this country? Who sold it? Who sold this country? How much was it sold for? Can we redeem it? Is it possible to redeem it? I don't understand exactly where we are, to the point where we do not seem to understand that these unilateral and opaque decisions that explains nothing to anybody, not even a pretense at carrying along the rubber stamp legislative hand. Does it make any sense that we, who are the victims, sit on the fringe whilst decisions are taken, impacting our interest and the interest of our children, the future of everybody, and we just keep quiet?
Oh yes, who sold Nigeria? This has been a big question. Everybody need to ask himself, and everybody need to answer, because the situation of the country today, it is now shown that the main people that need to speak, they are not speaking. The main people that need to fight for their freedom, they are not. What they do is just to sit down and look and talk and murmur. And the worst part of it is that sometime you go to churches, some of those pastors, they will tell you with their sweet mouth and other things, and tell you God will fight for you. Although God used to fight, but we as a human being, we need to speak the truth, and we need to talk against the evil that is happening in the country. Something will happen before something will start going. So um Dele have already said everything the way it is. He have already explained everything the way it is. So there is no need of still talking more, because the country we are today, so many things is happening. Everybody knows that. The way the Fulani terrorists take over everywhere, and that is the main reason why Mazam Nekano will say he's the prophet of our time, and is a savior of Nigeria and also the savior of Africa. But due to the evil mind of the people, the evil mind of those who have already sold their soul to the devil, they pick it upon themselves and say, and start calling somebody who is sent, start calling him a terrorist. That is how Nigeria is being structured. It's been structured for evil, for demonic, and for doing bad things. So no matter how you come up to speak and debunk the evil, the people, those evil ones that has paint their life with demonic paint, they will still be telling you you are evil. So that is how it is. Well, a good man dying in a cell where there is evil. So when the evil one coming out claiming to become white, that is the main reason why Nigeria is being suffering the way it is suffering today. It is only God. And people need to rise up to speak for the right and to talk. And the main thing that will happen in this country, the main thing that will make the country to start working, is for every zone to go and develop your side. We have already had everything from Delhi, so there is no need of still beating the dead goat. The best way is everyone, every zone, go and develop your side. Once you are going, don't ever you imitate the situation of Nigeria, and don't look the leadership of Nigeria change and become a better of your state. That is what is there. Well, by next week, we are going to post the remaining speech by Dele. I say thank you for watching. As you're watching, try to share the video to go around, let others see and let others understand this consequence, the things that is going on in Nigeria, and who that sold this country. I say thank you for watching.